destroyed, how can I hold them accountable to that? It becomes even more essential to have sources of information such as Wikipedia that are accurate, neutral, because of different power dynamics, and that accurate, accessible, and that have useful information in a language that I can understand that would be useful to enable me in taking action. Knowledge powers action, action powers change. If I don't have the knowledge, then I can't take that next action.
Thank you very much. Knowledge and knowledge and taking action. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Phyllis. Phyllis is our panelist who's joining us virtually from Mombasa. And Phyllis has an interesting story when you talk about taking action. I got to know about, I heard about Phyllis for the first time, I think way back, that must have been around 2010 or 2011, when she stood up to a company that was actually her employer, you know, and whose activities were polluting the environment with lead. And Phyllis has since then done so much work, and she will tell us about that. Phyllis, your story is a proof that no voice is too small when it comes to taking governments and taking big corporations to account. Now, I'd like to invite you now to share some lessons with us on what you have learned in bringing communities together to seek environmental justice. Phyllis, if you can hear us.
Yes, thank you so much. So my work started way in 2009, where a community of 3,000 Kenyans was exposed to pollution. And this pollution was causing heavy metal poisoning, lead poisoning in their blood. So at the beginning, you know, I believed that it was an easy thing. You know, if there's pollution somewhere, you'd say, okay, there's pollution here, and expect both state and non-state actors would be interested in acting. However, it has taken me more than 13 years, and I'm still pushing for environmental justice with this single community that was exposed to lead poisoning. Now, the biggest lessons that I learned when I set out to do this work was that it is not to challenge the responsibility of towards the rest of the environment. You can remember in 2009, rights to a clean and healthy environment was not yet recognized.
Phyllis, may I request you to say that lesson again?
2010,
Phyllis, may I request you to take that lesson again? We lost you a bit.
All right. The first lesson is that it's not easy to hold both state and non-state actors to challenge their responsibilities towards the protection of the right to a clean and healthy environment. This is because when you challenge mostly the right to a clean and healthy environment, you are actually asking people to invest in protecting the environment, or to invest in methods that will counter pollution and things like that, which a lot of corporates would not be very willing to do because they are in business to maximize profit. And therefore, when you challenge their responsibility towards the protection of the right to a clean and healthy environment, you are saying, I need you to invest in protecting nature, in protecting the environment in the course of doing your business. So I learned this very earlier on. And also, it challenges also the responsibility of the state. Kenya is one of the countries that is very progressive in terms of our constitution. We have already recognized the right to a clean and healthy environment in 2010 before the UN recognized it as a right. And therefore, in terms of legislation, I learned that we are way ahead. But when it comes to the implementation process, we have had to challenge so many things within the execution of the protection of the right to a clean and healthy environment. For example, when we raised the issue of lead poisoning in Onohuru, Kenya at that time was unable to test for lead poisoning. And so if you say that you suspect there's lead poisoning, how then do you prove that there's lead poisoning in the environment? And I remember those first days, we would have to take blood samples, environmental samples to South Africa for a week, and then they get the results back from South Africa. So those are the small nitty-gritties that we began challenging then. Right now, there are so many pathology labs in Kenya that are testing for lead poisoning. We've seen even government chemists now is able to test for lead poisoning. So we've been challenging also issues of procedural environmental rights. When communities are denied access to information, then they are unable to make decisions, informed decisions regarding the environment. For example, the Winohuru community was never told that the smelter was going to be releasing toxic chemicals into the environment. So how then would they have known that they are supposed to protect themselves? These are issues that we also have been challenging, both the state and non-state actors. And the last one was access to effective remedy. That is access to justice through, we chose to work through the judiciary, where we put a case in court in 2016, challenging the responsibility of both 6 state agencies and 2 non-state agencies towards the protection of the right to a clean and healthy environment. This also has not been easy. As you know, the courts in Kenya are very slow. But one positive aspect about our country is that with the recognition of the right to a clean and healthy environment in Article 42 and the following Articles 69 and 70 in the Constitution, it has been, it gave birth to the London Environment Court, for example, which is an avenue within which citizens can challenge the protection of work through the judiciary. We also have engaged other arms of government, including the judiciary, in challenging this responsibility. And they've all risen up to their mandate and have worked closely with us. But sadly, up to today, since 2009, the Winohuru community is still waiting to access justice. I'll end it there for now.
Thank you very much, Phyllis. I mean, I also see the fact that perhaps it cannot be a sprint. It has to be a marathon. And I don't know if from the beginning you perhaps expected that it was going to take that long. That maybe 13 years later you're still trying to seek justice for the same community, even when a judicial decision had already been made. Did you expect to take this long?
No, it still perplexes me up to today, because when I began, I believed, the first thing I did was just tell them, you see, this thing has to be addressed. And I did think that at any point that anyone would be reluctant or resistant to addressing this issue, because for me it was a very pertinent. It involved the environment, and I thought that it would be very fast in resolving. So I was I'm up to today, I'm really still shocked, and I don't understand the mentality where up to today, even the state agencies that are mandated with protecting the right to a clean and healthy environment are still challenging our cases, or challenging our case in terms of they do not want to raise to their responsibility in protecting these rights. And therefore, it's to me, I'm still shocked until today that we are not getting what we are trying to achieve, even though we've had a lot of successes. Remember, in 2014, we managed to shut down the smelter. 17 are located in similar surrounding with the human, a lot of human population around them. Therefore, we've had some successes, but it still shocks me until today that anyone would be reluctant in implementing this right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And we'll come back to you again on those state agencies and what has transpired so far. But I'd like to bring in Peter now. Peter, perhaps there's something that sort of comes to you directly now from that conversation. One, that activism will never be a sprint. You're in it for the long haul. You got yourself in the muddle, and you're going to have to stick in until those results are realized. And secondly, that even state agencies that are responsible for the protection of the environment may not take so much responsibility. But I particularly want to talk about the protection of critical ecosystems. You mentioned about Kakamega rainforest. We have like water tower, and ecosystems has often been politicized so that people share the relevant for them to thrive or succeed in certain narrow interests. Yeah? So I'd like you to respond to this, to two questions. One is how we enable communities to get the proper information so that they can frame these things for themselves in the right manner. And two, about how you are preparing the people that to tell them this is not some thrill where we are working for, but something.
Thank you. Phyllis's story has really hit a nerve. I started my journey in terms of conservation and biodiversity work when I was 20 in 2013. And I was an activist. And in 2014, I was taken to South Africa for the World Rhino Youth Summit, and I was a keynote speaker. And when I was in South Africa, I met this conservationist called Dr. Ian Player. Now, Dr. Ian Player saved the white rhino from extinction in South Africa. And he told me, whether you're a conservationist, a youth enthusiast, a young professional, scientist, an activist, no matter what you are, if you don't work with government, you're not going to achieve anything. And this blew my mind because I was a very much an activist 2013 to 2014. And this made me really change a lot of my approach. And when I hear Phyllis's story, and I really want to talk to her after this because it's all about the approach. I can tell you right now, when it comes to corporates and the state agencies, you show them what they do wrong, they will look at you as an enemy. You show them what they do wrong in a boardroom with a solution, and you use a different channel, then they'll look at you as a partner. Now, the problem is, how do you get that access? And for me, the main thing when I was listening to this, I was like, that's a basic right. It got me so angry. I was like, I don't even know about that story of a community of 3,000 being poisoned and their blood having metal and lead. And I was just like, why haven't I heard of this? And that is such a basic human right that is being violated. And it just makes me frustrated that we live in such big silos where she may have some information that I need to solve my problems and my community problems, and I have information that she needs to solve her problems. And we're working parallel yet never meeting, and then struggling with obstacles that I have the solution and she has the solution, but you don't. So for me, if there's anything that the Wikipedia Foundation and that we need to do from today is break this isolation and barriers and create bridges and create access and create synergies and create partnerships. Because let me tell you, we're in a world where we're taught there's no space for you. You have to fight for your space, and you can't partner with this person because they'll outshine you, and you can't partner with this person because they are better than you and they'll take your resources. And this just keeps us all apart and doesn't help us solve the bigger issue. Now to your question, because my blood was just boiling. One thing that we do, and one thing that even resonated, as an organization, we do a lot of advocacy. Advocacy to governments, to non-state actors, to communities. And Phyllis's story just made me realize about our latest advocacy, and it's called Can You Hear Us? And basically, we're telling the governments, can you hear us? There is the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework coming up. UNFCCC is happening in Africa, which is a great opportunity. So we're asking them, can you hear us? Our actions loud enough for you? Do you understand we have a future? And if you can hear us, show us in your decisions that you make. So a lot of advocacy, a lot of lobbying, and we always say hope in action, showing that the young people are doing something and that are not just standing there complaining, but they're doing something while they're waiting for the support, while they're waiting for the legal frameworks to back them up, and while they're waiting for governments of the world to actually take action. And then last but not least, we have something called Bonga Nagava, which is basically our good governance and policy tool where we break down policies. So recently, the Kenya Forestry, they did the Forestry Act, and we did Bonga Nagava, where we broke down the policy to young people, did WhatsApp engagements, online engagements to hear what they have to say, collect all the data, and then submit it. So this is one thing that I would love to work again with Wikipedia and the UNEP legal is we need to break down these policies, make them understandable, and get the information and the data from the young people of what they're saying as much as they can and submit it and then lobby for it to be enacted. I think the main thing is access of information, but also empowerment. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Peter mentioned, can you hear us? And if you can hear us in the audience or in the virtual audience on YouTube or whatever other source you can find us on, please engage with us on Twitter, #Wiki for Human Rights, and we will hear you back and share and amplify your voice. Olivia, Peter has talked about working in silos, and I know one of the things that is happening now internationally
Sorry. Yeah, that's a really great question because a lot of what's already been raised here is the problem of implementation for these treaties, for the laws, for this understanding of how to protect the environment, right? So even if it's on the books, is it being implemented? Is it protecting anyone? Is it taking anyone's voices into account in how it's implemented? Another problem is one country's actions. They go beyond one country's regulations of the environment. So what becomes really critical is increasing global understanding and cooperation. Because as Peter mentioned, it's not just the governments that are regulating the environment or impacting the environment, but it's non-state actors. It's people who fall outside of the realm of these legal frameworks. So what has to be taken into account is merging the obligations so for example, at the Human Rights Council, they have special rapporteurs on specific subjects. And there is a special rapporteur on human rights and the environment. And in 2018, he released the Framework Principles on Human Rights and the Environment, which takes into account a really sustainable and robust way of monitoring the environment, protecting it, ensuring human rights are protected and promoted, not only for governments, because that is essential here. Because a government, it's going to think about the economic interest and it's going to think about more than necessarily taking away the environmental benefits that its community is receiving and the global community is receiving. So it becomes this really kind of terrible, wicked web of problems, right? There's so many entry points and there's so much to do, which is what's needed for this continued action from everyone, and to a basic, at least baseline understanding from everyone on how to engage in the process and how to ensure that the process is being made and being supported and implemented with their voices and their future in hand. So I would really encourage everyone to look at this human rights special rapporteur's work. He's done really incredible work. And I really, the implementation gap, actually, that's another thing to note. The UNEP put out the Environmental Rule of Law report, which noted that, there's been massive increase in environmental laws on the books. Times increase in environmental laws, the implementation gap has never been weaker throughout the world for environmental protection. And that was in 2019. As a lot of us know, or maybe we don't, during the COVID-19 pandemic, environmental laws were significantly withdrawn and weakened in support of economic recovery. So Build Back Greener has never been more important because people were prohibited from protesting the rollback of environmental laws in the name of COVID regulations. But those regulations are ongoing. They're in a number of countries throughout the world. You cannot protest at oil and gas pipelines because of this economic recovery. So there's a significant decrease in access to civil space to protect yourselves and to protect the environment. So this is the Building Back Greener has to promote civic space, has to promote and protect environmental human rights defenders, and it has to increase access to information more than what the government is providing. Because a lot of this human rights framework is trying to ensure that you can have access to your human rights, you can protect your human rights when the government is not doing it. And bringing the environmental dimension into human rights allows another avenue for people to understand that the environment is affected outside of the government as well, and it needs us to speak for it.
I'd like to bring in Veronica at this point. We're breaking this intricate web at the local level, and I'm talking about Kenya now. When you look at our country, would you say there are information gaps regarding climate and environmental justice that perhaps, even beginning with the people in this room, we can bridge or solve? Yeah.
Related when she mentioned about the land report that we did, the question was raised, how can I access it? Who else is aware? Peter was talking about, the question I had is the information, while the information is being collected, is it neutral? Is it fact-based? Is it current? So looking at what information needs to be and what we have, there's certainly very huge gaps that we can all contribute to. I am thinking about something Olivia has just mentioned about people like Phyllis, defenders of the environment. Have we documented their work? Have we talked about the different things they've pushed to advance the right to the healthy environment? I'm also thinking about when he was talking about the different parts of our ecosystem that have been destroyed. Have we documented those, or will generations to come and the quest ahead is not just for us, it's for future generations? Have we documented about water reserves that somehow are getting depleted, cultural practices as well that ideally have been able to, show us what sustainable living looks like? Have we documented those? And when I think about things that we can do, I think the first part is to recognize the moment we are in. We are at a moment, someone will call a climate, we're in a movement, climate movement. We are all talking about sustainable development goals, and everyone is thinking about how can I contribute to this sustainable development. So I would say we are in the right moment, and in this moment, there are many intersectionalities that bring us to this space. So there's within this room, for example, we have people working on gender issues, recognizing that when we talk about climate justice, it's not affecting climate change is not affecting all of us equally, and we need to raise that voice and say this is how it's affecting me. When we are they going to experience even the little that we are experiencing today? When you look back at histories and her stories, is what we're experiencing similar to what they experienced? Or sometimes I want to say I feel shortchanged about the life we're living. There's a lot of food. There's a lot around culture that we don't have because of the incremental distractions in our environment. I'm also so that's the intersection, recognizing those intersections. The second bit is I think all of us can identify what is this part within the it's almost like your public knowledge mission. I am called to speak about biodiversity. I did meet Akinyi, who talked about I am passionate about wildlife. Is that her, I almost want to say her calling towards there's a missing gap in public knowledge around wildlife, around species that could be getting extinct, whether it's in different parts of or forms of biodiversity. Once I accomplish that, I think we can all align to existing open knowledge platforms, and one of them is Wikipedia. Anyone can access Wikipedia. Anyone can contribute to the knowledge that already exists, and anyone can contribute in the language that they can speak and understand. And that's powerful when we think about even what's happening to our languages and who is speaking the languages that that our grandparents who know, knowledge that we currently do not have, but are we also creating space for them to actually feel, I have a lot of knowledge, I have all these experiences, I can contribute not only in text, that's why we have a Wikimedia Commons that allows you to put in image and video-based information, and many others. We have quotes, so many free knowledge projects that allow you to get into it. And lastly, recognizing that it is your mission, it is our mission, and you don't have to walk the journey alone. There is a thriving community. We are here because of the Kenyan Wikimedian community, and they are here to support that journey. If I want, for example, to learn, I feel called, the blood is boiling. I feel called to edit on, let's say the forest in Kakamega that he mentioned. Can I go after this and do something about it? What can I do? I could either go to, and I'm very happy to hear we have librarians here because we need to bring the custodians of knowledge to the table as well. There's a lot that is in the archives that we need to make open for people to access. And can I get that information? Can I upload it online? Can I contribute it online? And can I also create a space to talk about it, such as this forum? I think that's when I think about what can we do, I think that's one place. And to just close and say, a lot of the work that we need to do is not from a desk. It is not from your desk. It's not from my desk. We need to work with people on the ground, the practitioners in the ground, because they do have this information. When we talk about floods, and I liked Winnie's earlier example about borehole water, she's experiencing now, it's now. But how many communities have experienced what she's experienced many years in the past? And let's bring that knowledge, let's create spaces for that knowledge to be celebrated, but also to be documented.
Thank you very much. You spoke about, not just knowledge, but also, carrying forward our stories. And I'd love to bring in Phyllis now one more time, because when Phyllis started her work against this lead pollution, she hadn't learned that her own child actually had an illness that was related to lead pollution. And I'd love to know, Phyllis, how this. First of all, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Great. Okay, so I'd love to know how this influenced your work, and if you did share your story when you learned that your own child was actually suffering from an illness that is caused by the pollution in this environment. Did you share your story with the community that you are trying to mobilize against this pollution, and how did this change your work from then on? Because now I think this becomes personal. And how did it change the way in which people relate with your story and how it resonates with them?
So I strongly believe that it was because of my son's exposure to lead poisoning that I became even more passionate about this issue, because he started getting sick and ended up being hospitalized. And as we kept testing the blood to try and find what was happening, we couldn't put our fingers what was in his blood. Because when you are sick, the first thing that is stated is malaria, typhoid, and all that, and it was all negative. But he had elevated white blood cells in his body, even though the hospitals at that time did not have capacity to test for poisoning. So one of the people that was friends with me, who worked in a certain state agency, actually visited me in hospital and suggested that I test his blood for lead poisoning. And when I tested his blood for lead poisoning, he tested positive for lead poisoning. So after I discharged him from hospital a month later, I went into the Winohuru community and picked 10 children and tested them for lead poisoning. And all 10 of them tested positive for lead poisoning. At that time, WHO defined lead poisoning at 5 micrograms, at 10 micrograms per deciliter. They've since then revised it to 5 micrograms per deciliter of lead in blood, meaning at 5 micrograms, you already have lead poisoning. And in Winohuru, the children that I tested had up to 45 micrograms per deciliter of lead. Right now, the highest lead level in Winohuru is for a young lady who has 480 micrograms. That is like 800 times lead in blood. So this personal story, my son, who has what I do. I know that I, as a point, who had very high at the end.
Phyllis, I'd like to stop you for a bit so that we try sort that out, and when we come back, we can get your story a lot more clearly, because it's very important that we do. And Peter, I'd like to bring you in at this point. Okay. Phyllis, we'll be back with you shortly. Peter, from the story of Owinohuru in Mombasa, you can tell that maybe all of us are just walking dead. It's just that we do not have the evidence. I'd like to know from your perspective and the work that you are doing, how critical is it to have two things? One, our individual stories, bringing our individual stories to activism, what we have experienced and what we are going through now. And number two, having evidence, because Phyllis went one more step to get a number of people tested, like 10 children, and all of them were found to have been lead poisoned. And this just changes the way in which people relate with what you're saying.
Yeah. Thank you very much. The importance of your story cannot be overlooked. I mean, the reason I'm here today, when I won top 35 under 35 award, that's how I met Kabinti from Wikipedia, and even it's to tell your story. The way Phyllis has told her story, the way many people need to tell their story, is to inspire change. It's to influence your environs. Your voice, your experience, what you have been through is what will open doors not only for you, but for the people around you and for what you stand for. I think many times as Africans, dare I say, as Africans, we hesitate from ego and pride because we may think about it in a different way. Whereas in the Western culture, being popular or being in the limelight or being a hero is not a bad thing. Where in Africa, it may be looked or frowned upon like, oh, that person is trying to chase clout, or that person just wants money, or that person is fake and not authentic. So most African, and even in my generation, are scared to tell their story or to put themselves out there because of the backlash that they may get and because of the lack of support. So things like Wikipedia and Wiki Foundation, in terms of trying to uplift those stories, whether they've done on Phyllis, whether they're going to go to Kakamega, whether they're going to go do on mangroves, whether they're going to do on elephants, whatever it is, they're uplifting an entire voice of a generation and a community. And so I just want to tell everyone, do not shy away from telling your story. Do not think you are boasting. Do not think you are trying to steal the shine of the gods or whoever you believe in. You need to tell your story because it's important in opening the door for a conversation around what is affecting you and your people, a conversation on what is affecting the environment. So that's the importance. And then number two, I think evidence in every way increases the credibility of everything. For example, in some projects that we've done as pilots, we have proven that youth can be assets in conservation across Africa. And because of that evidence, funding comes in not just for us, but more youth entities. So evidence in terms of even Phyllis's story, it got personal one, so she got more passionate and more driven. Number two, she then had a foundation of it's happening to me, it's happening to you. We need to do something about it and come together. And this comes now with the interconnection. How can I be happy when you are not? Compassion, kindness, empathy. Ubuntu, also what we're doing right now is called Ubuntu Nature Positive 2030, which is about what is the connectivity between me, you, the air, the soil, the environment, the biodiversity, everything, and trying to find out every single part. And like my fellow panelist Olivia said, reconnecting. Actually, one of our campaigns in 2020 was reconnecting with nature because there is a disconnection with us and nature. There's a disconnection between the legislation, the legal framework, the human rights. There's so much disconnectivity. And also in the world of connectivity, we're still disconnected. So this is an important forum and also an important time where linking the dots and bringing us together. And I always say like this, we're weak, like this, we're stronger. Bringing us together, bringing the expertise in the room and on this panel to then bring more impactful change. So I think that's what I'll say. Thank you.
Yeah, and Veronica, there are reputable sources like newspapers and the media in general that are referenced on Wikipedia, helping to firm up the information that you are providing. And now that we are talking about stories and how we share them, do you think that the local media, for example, is doing enough? Are there gaps? Is there more that we can do to tell these stories better and provide better support to the work that you're already doing?
And I think, you know, to introduce the question is, I think where we are, how dire the effects of climate change is, it can no longer be, I think, for others to do. I think that the current, I don't say battle, but the mission is personal and political. When people say the personal is political, I think the current time we are in speaks to that we can't wait for legislation for us to feel ready to share the stories. As we share the stories, but coming back to your question about media, I think more needs to be done, and it's not just about by the media. It's all of us. All of us have something to give to preserve knowledge, to contribute to knowledge, to contribute to current information in a reliable and neutral format. Coming back to Wikipedia, Wikipedia allows for that opportunity for people to all of us. Again, it's not just the media, it's not the communications person, it is not the activists. I think it's all of us, because the issue we're speaking about affects all of us. And because of how dire things are, I think we are all called to do something about it. So I wouldn't say it's the media. I think it's
When we talk about things like pollution and biodiversity and nature loss and climate change, and people are starting to talk about climate rights when they're having this climate litigation, it's creating this new language of human rights that puts the environment integrally next to your own life, and as a requirement for yours and other lives, which is this really astounding, at least from the legal point of view, is this really astounding new wave of litigation, but also just of mindset, which has been really, really incredible.
Mm-hmm. And the recognition by the UN last year, the UN Human Rights Council, when it adopted the resolution recognizing, human right to a healthy and sustainable environment. Is this something that should be celebrated? Does it mean anything to us?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely think so, of course, because something communities throughout the world have been very, very acutely aware of for generations. But what's so important about recognizing it at this universal level is that it creates more and more momentum for all the other auspices that it impacts. It creates new avenues to start getting your voices heard, to start impacting governments and business regulation, because it creates a new entry point, but also a new tether for all of these discussions to be held. So if you were talking about, in the UNFCCC this year, if we're talking about the right to a healthy environment as integral to climate action, it creates another wave of momentum for governments to really start implementing and actually living up to the promises made, right? So it's another tool in the tool belt is how I like to think of it. It all helps each other. You can't build a house with just a hammer. You need everything in your tool belt. And I think it's interesting because we're really moving away a lot from discussing this as a war, as you mentioned, like not using these battle terms. And I completely agree. UNEP just put out a report called "Making Peace with Nature" because it's ending this violence that we've inflicted on the world, essentially, and it's starting to rebuild and reform and reconnect what our understanding of the interdependency of our lives and the environment is. So the recognition of the Human Rights Council is not universal, but it is a massive step in this reconnection, and it is this really, coalition building. There were over 1,000 civil society organizations that helped, 15 UN agencies. We start talking about access rights and what it really, really means to uphold the right to a healthy environment. We talk about the substance and how a healthy environment is comprised of a stable climate, healthy and safe water and sanitation, food, land, biodiversity. There's so many elements to it that it becomes this really protective umbrella, I think, for people to start sharing their stories and getting their voices in action on the table, which is, I think, one of the most important things, especially not just sharing information, but building communities and coalitions for this action. Because environmental defenders, as we've mentioned a few times now, as Phyllis knows all too well, they're some of the most persecuted defenders throughout the world. In 2020, 227 environmental defenders were killed. And that's the highest number of any human rights defenders throughout the world. And that number has increased every single year it's been reported. So I can't stress this enough that it's so essential for community building, for community resiliency, and for community protection to have this shared understanding of what the importance of a healthy environment is to our lives and futures.
And I know Phyllis has been working with a network of environmental defenders in the coast, and indeed, persecution is not a new term to them. They've encountered a number of those. But Phyllis, you left it off at the point where you were telling us that you got a number of children in the neighborhood tested, and you confirmed that several of them had been poisoned. Could you just pick it up from there a bit and share your story, and also a bit about the network of environmental defenders that we work with, before we throw it to our audience, because I'm sure they have some reactions and some questions. Phyllis? Did we lose her? Okay. Right. So as we get that sorted out, do we have any reactions from the floor? If you raise up your hand, we will make sure that you can be able. There's someone there. Will someone pass a mic?
Thank you so much. I'm Hamida Malasten. Sorry I came late. I didn't have an opportunity to introduce myself. I'm founder and CEO of Mazingira Women Initiative, which is a human rights environmental conservation organization, and we deal with environmental rights and climate change mitigation strategies. I appreciate the invitation of this forum, and very relevant issues that have been discussed. And thanks to Olivia on matters law, international law, and we are grateful. Last year is when, after COP26, that is when the nation realized that there is something called climate change issues and effects. So the conversation started coming home. But we still have a long way to go, and appreciating, just no question particularly, but appreciating what I've been hearing. There's a lot in line with the cultural aspect. There's a lot in line with planning. Already we have the climate change effects at home. And as an organization, what we do, we actually advocate for environmental conservation, whereby appreciating what the Paris Protocol of Kenya actually realizing that we need to have 10% forest cover. As an organization, we have a project in line with that. We are growing fruit trees across Nairobi County and Kibra. And basically, the conversation is very relevant because we are neighbor to Kibra, where we are. We are in Langata. We have Nairobi Dam, which is no longer Nairobi Dam. And that is the only a dam that could have been actually absorbing the carbon from the city center. So in line with the environmental degradation, we are not even talking about wars, we are talking about disasters. So I thank the organizers of this event, because the conversations are very relevant, and actually the stories are more. There are so many within the informal settlements that we are actually doing in line with the environmental conservation. So thank you so much for the invitation. Let us, we are learning and we will be sharing a lot too.
Thank you so very much. We will be taking more reactions and questions from the audience. Just allow me to bring in Phyllis for a few minutes. Phyllis, I believe now we can hear you. Please say a word. It seems we have lost Phyllis again. We have lost connection. Phyllis, we can see your image, but we can't hear your voice. And so we will let our team, a technical team, try to sort that out. Let's get more reactions from the floor as we wait. There's someone at the back.
Good morning or afternoon.
Maybe it's because we can't see you. That's why we also cannot hear you. Please stand up if you don't mind.
Sorry, I came in late.
You see, there's a big difference.
Okay. My name is Susan Mute. I'm a lawyer by profession. I hold environmental law so dear to me because of various issues. Mine is not a question, but maybe to contribute on what the panelists have said. And I can see my friend there, Peter. Do you remember me? I'm so bright to be forgotten. Anyway, we have the Sustainable Development Goals 2030, and now we are in 2022. And so far, I don't know what to comment on, because currently Kenya, we have food scarcity issues because of the climate change. Mine is to contribute on the transboundary pollution. We know environmental rights are collective rights, such that we cannot a specific group of people enjoy these rights but their right is enjoyed collectively. Not to justify anything, but currently Kenya, we have the states which are active contributors of these carbon emissions. But Kenya, I would personally say Kenya is more of a passive state of this. Okay, how will I put it? Sorry? We can't say Kenya is an emitter, but we are suffering from this emission from this country. Now, where do we come in? Where do we come in, or is there a risk for it? I don't know if you're getting my point. My point is that we have some active contributors of these carbon emissions, but Kenya, for example, and these Africa countries, to be specific, we are suffering as the result of those emissions. Now, what is the recourse? What recourse do we have? Because what we are experiencing right now as a state, there's food scarcity, the food prices are hiking up, and we are just suffering, basically. Yeah, so yes, we have the right to clean and healthy environment, but in as much as we are trying to protect that right as a state, we are suffering as a result of emissions from those states. Can we hold them accountable? And again, I feel like we need to establish an international environment court. To be honest, these environment matters are not taken seriously. If we establish such a court, then I think these things will be taken so dearly and so seriously. Yeah, that is my point.
Thank you very much. I think she's right. I mean, we are told that 20 of the world's most developed countries contribute over half of the global emissions, and that's big. Do we have Phyllis now? Should we wait? Okay.
I think that point is a very important point in two forms, and I'll start with the latter. In the CBD, which is the Convention of Biodiversity, they had something called the Aichi targets. Now, the Aichi targets failed because of the implementation framework, right? And now we're going to the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. But did we really focus on why the Aichi targets failed? Not really. So for me, I really agree with you. As much as there is really a push for a global consensus on environmental biodiversity, nature, wildlife, climate change, there is not enough traction on the ground. There's not enough implementation, and it is almost like it's all talk and no action. And you know, even if you talk about the SDGs, the MDGs ended. Was there really a review on why they failed? We jumped to the SDGs. I personally love the SDGs because they're the most beautiful package and distribute framework I've ever seen in this world. But again, implementation, monitoring and evaluation, it's not there. The traction on the ground is not there. If you talk about climate change to a farmer in Kericho, he wouldn't understand. But if you tell him, oh, is there something different about your crops and how you're going about it? Yeah, the rain is different, the soil is like this, and then you're like, that's climate change. Oh. So I really feel the traction on the ground for these international agreements is missing, and the implementation and the backing is missing. Now to your first point, which is the most sensitive topic of our time right now. When it comes to Africa, when it comes to Kenya, we are the victims, not the emitters. And when we talk about human rights and environmental rights, the biggest right that is being jeopardized right now is the fact that we are suffering from something we did not cause, yet there is no real finance or resource backing the solution, the mitigation, and the adaptation, and the support for the victims. I'll leave it as that.
All right. So before we come to you, allow me to go to Phyllis now.
My audio now?
Ah, fantastic. Great.
Sorry about that. So we were at testing the children. 10 all tested positive for lead poisoning. And hello, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right. So one of the biggest the burden.
So, Phyllis, maybe you come to us on audio so that we ease up the bandwidth a bit.
Saying stop the video.
Yes. Let's try that and see if it works better.
All right. So the burden of proof of tests I've explained and proving that there was something wrong with the environment was put on the victims. And this is one of the things that we were challenging through the litigation case, where we needed to challenge this responsibility. What is the responsibility of the state and the responsibility of the corporation towards the protection of this right to a clean and healthy environment? I think that's where question. I lost you there. Yes.
All right, so we cannot hear Phyllis again. Two people had asked to speak on this side, starting with, what's your name, please? Let's pass the microphone to her. And hopefully we'll be able to hear Phyllis before we go.
Good morning to you all. My name is Phoebe Matunda Mzee. I have a question for any of the panelists. So we are discussing about the right to a healthy environment. We've talked about all the policies that are there. And my question is, how can we keep governments of the world accountable? And how can we do it together with them as we are all working towards a healthy environment? Thank you.
Thank you very much. How can we do it together? I'd like to take one more, or someone at the back, before we come to the panelists.
Good morning. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Diani Mgalizi from the Kenya Climate Change Working Group, and I have a question to either.
Just keep it closer.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Diani Mgalizi from the Kenya Climate Change Working Group, and I have two questions to either of the panelists. So my first question is, we are talking of matters of climate change, and we have one thing right now. People are talking about how we should reduce the carbon emissions. So maybe one of the panelists can talk to us about carbon pricing, if it works for you. We want to know how you guys are working towards including that in what you do so that we can help by reducing the carbon emissions. On my question number 2, this I'll direct it directly to Peter Moll. You're talking about, you can get me. You're talking about activists working with the government. What if these governments, yes, you've sat down, you've put up regulations, but then these governments are not working towards initializing, like yes, there are laws, but their laws are not being amended. but these are the governments that you're saying we should work with them. As an activist, you are there to, as a watchdog to the people. Like for instance, let's talk of solid waste. There's very good laws that are there to regulate on the matters of solid waste, but solid waste is rampant all over. How can you now work with the government towards now making sure that NEMA is addressing these matters of solid waste? I don't know if you got my point, Peter. Okay, thank you.
So maybe we start with Peter. I think we have 3 questions. 2 of them are interrelated, because the first question was on how to take governments internationally to account while also working with them as partners. Okay.
Thank you. We were discussing as we heard these questions that we think the lawyer will respond with legal avenues and the activists will respond with other avenues, and the Wikimedian will say access to information, which all 3 are important. I think what's really vital here is that there is no one answer for this. There is no one way to engage with these issues and to build a kind of onswell of community activism. And as far as for the international processes, it's, as we saw last year at the UNFCCC COP, there is a lot of criticism of how few people and civil societies and activists on the ground are allowed to participate in these decision-making processes. So one of the procedural rights we've mentioned already is the access to information, followed by access to participation, meaningful participation in decision-making processes. So what does that mean if these events and these conferences are organized without meaningful engagement for youth voices, for environmental activists, for civil society? What can we do about it? The answer is pressure. It's just continued pressure on these organizations and on these organizers to and to have your voices heard, maybe through the media if you're protesting on the outside the COP, or if you're drawing attention to the fact that, okay, this is what's going on, this is what decision was made. It's not enough. It's constant pressure, because that's the only thing that I've seen in these international processes that really create differences in change of engagement. And I feel like I just stepped a little bit, that was my personal opinion, I should say. But it is important because these are organized to have, they're all government-led processes, they're all country-led processes at the international level. And it's important to have equitable participation of all countries. The question is, how do you ensure that the country representatives are vocalizing what you are all saying, what your citizens are saying on the ground? So that starts in the grassroots, it starts here, it starts with your own government, and pressure. If they're not vocalizing what your beliefs are and what you know to be true, then you have to go another way, which I think is where the activists should come in.
First of all, I am not an activist. and it's good that I say I'm not an activist, because I think from 2014, we changed our strategy completely. And actually, we go through the policy, strategies, grassroots, regional, continental, and international. So our strategy completely changed. Yes, I may sound like an activist. Yes, I am an activist at heart, but I am not an activist by profession, if I should say that. I would say I'm more of a conservationist, a youth leader, and a change maker. But to answer the questions, number one, when it comes to the strategy that we have taken in Kenya and in East Africa and Africa, we have realized the number one thing is you need a backing, what my fellow panelists here calls a toolkit. Now, this toolkit allows you to operate and to construct and do what you need to do to get the results. So what we did as an organization through the National Wildlife Strategy 2030, through the National Tourism Blueprint 2030, through the Wildlife Act 2013, and also now the Wildlife Act, which is being amended right now, we lobbied for the youth inclusion in those strategies and policies. In the Forestry Act, we've also lobbied. And why we did this is because now within the National Tourism Blueprint and the National Wildlife 2030 strategy, we have something called Mabingwa. And this Mabingwa is a youth component, which we now have been lobbying and using for youth inclusion within Kenya Wildlife Service and the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, as well as now we're lobbying within KFS and the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Why is this? Youth need structured space. When we talk about climate action, when we talk about wildlife, against wildlife extinction, we talk against biodiversity loss, we need structured space for young people to be assets, to bring their innovation, to bring their energy, to bring their capacity. As an activist in 2013 and 2014, I would be shouting at the government, protesting, tweeting, that's fine. But now I raise awareness, I advocate, I lobby, and as well as negotiate, right? And so for me, when it comes to the climate movement in Kenya and in Africa, you must become inclusive. Inclusive that you open and realize climate change cuts across. Those who deal with wildlife conservation and environmental conservation must be in the climate change movement. So as climate change leaders in Kenya, I challenge you, reach out to as many young people in as many different sectors, from agriculture to renewable energy to wildlife conservation, and create a holistic movement. Because right now, climate change seems like an inclusive, or an exclusive, I mean, right? And so we have to make sure that we all realize we're fighting for the same goal with different angles and different tools, but we need all the tools to build the house that we want. So that's to your question. There was a first question, which, yes, carbon pricing. So it's very interesting. You're talking about carbon credits. So now in terms of carbon credits, I am for it and against it. Why am I against it? Because the emitters are paying the victims to emit, right? And it's supposed to be a compensation scheme. But it's not compensating in a dignified manner. But in terms of carbon credits, in terms of now us empowering the communities, I love it. There are many different ways that we can use carbon credits, especially in terms of the coastal region. I mean, I have Suso Mombasa. They planted 7,000 mangroves in 2 sittings. And I was like, what? 7,000 mangroves in 2 days? And you're a small group, limited resources. So there is so much we can get for carbon credits for our communities. But in terms of how it's set up, I think it is the wrong compensation because it doesn't dignify. All it does is allow the emitters to emit while paying to emit, rather than allowing them to pay for already emitting without buying more carbon credits. To my colleague's question, I think the number one thing I will tell you is when it comes to holding governments accountable, you must be on the table. And that is when you're on the table, it is a structured format. You sit on the table of, let's say, the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife as a youth representative. You are then able to hold them accountable on that table. But if you sit on the street, they may just think you're a noise. So the way you need to hold governments accountable is to be part of the implementation framework and also the monitoring and evaluation framework of the implementation of these international treaties. For example, KWS has Solomon Kialo, who's in charge of CITES, which is the Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species. He also works with the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Cyrus, who is in charge of the CBD. So you see, these are treaties that have people in the country who are mandated about them, who may not have enough resources and capacity to actually implement or monitor those treaties. So we, as innovative young people, must come and say, we're going to help. Yes, we think you're not doing a good job, but we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on helping you do the job that we need you to do. Thanks.
My few additions. Like I said before, we all have a role to play. While we have approaches that have been mentioned about how to hold different stakeholders accountable. I think we also need to hold ourselves accountable. It is not them doing, then we follow. I think we all have a part to play. The call to mitigate effects of climate change has to be personal. We can all do something in our daily practices, in our homes, to reduce climate change effects. When I think about the movement, the Wikimedia movement, we can all play different roles. There are contributors, there are sharers, there are those who use. So as you use information, so before I came, I said, let me check, amongst our water escapements, what's the information? Then I decided, let me look at MAU, and there's just less than a paragraph about Mao. Yet we know in this room the significance of Mao in our daily lives, the history it holds, and that comes back to the stories. But why haven't we? It's a question of why is that information not present? Have we not found ways to contribute to it? Are there different ways of contributing that information? We should be aware that you don't only have to contribute in text. I think we have a lot of stories that we are in an age where it's either video or sometimes not. Let's use the current trends to add more information so that we are documenting the different changes in our climate as well. So we all have a role. Find your mission. How will I contribute? What can I do? And who can I work with? Community is key. The mission ahead, while it is personal, I think at the end of it all, it will work when we are a community.
Sorry, just to add to these really incredible discussion, and thanks so much for correcting me, of course, but also those contributions. Just something to add that I think kind of, at least in my mind, marries these two pretty well is the proliferation of holding governments accountable through the law, of course. So there are different landmark cases that I think once they're put on sites like Wikipedia, you learn from, and then other lawyers take, and then other communities build, and they look for opportunities to start holding their governments accountable in a similar way, because you see the story and then you see the strategy right afterwards. So like cases like your agenda, where the Dutch government said, okay, we don't emit that much, but emitting this is still too much, okay? Because it's impacting other people. We still have our part to play. That goes a little bit into the transboundary issue that you raised before. Or in, regional human rights treaty bodies like the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which heard a complaint from a number of youth saying, these are the biggest emitters and they're impacting my right to life in this country. What are you going to do about it? And there was international attention. It was a first complaint of its kind. And now a lot of people are starting to use those strategies and those theories to take it to other places and have it enforced and change the conversation from not just, okay, what are you discussing at these international processes, but you've already committed to this through your own domestic court. You have to take this forward now. And then how do you bring that to your own country, to your own, even local governments, especially local governments. So I think that's a really nice synergy between all of those, because I know in last year's edit-a-thon, there were tons and tons of cases that were translated and put into new Wikimedia communities. That was really incredible to see. So that's just something to add there.
All right. So this conversation continues, but this panel discussion ends here. I'd like to give just one final chance to someone in the audience who may want to add their voices to this conversation before we close. All right. There's no one? We did not. Oh, okay. There is. Let's get her the mic. Right? Do you want to share mine?
Mine doesn't come out as a question, but just for the panelists, maybe one person could tell us, as we step out of this room, why is it important for us to really care for the environment? Anyone will pick after this, it should be that. Yeah.
Sure. In my opinion, caring for the environment is caring for yourself, caring for your family, caring for your community. It's caring for everyone you love because it is what you need to survive and to live a life of dignity for the future.
You can hear me? Yes. I think the environment is you. And when you start thinking that I am nature, nature is me, you start thinking about how am I taking care of myself and how am I then taking care of nature because then nature is me. Yeah.
Great. I have 1 minute. So you all have dreams? Dreams? Everyone raise your hands. Dreams? No? Okay, hands down. So number one, if you love yourself, you'll take care of the environment. But we all know we have some insecurities, so you may not love yourself fully. Huh? But if you believe that you have a dream and that you need dignity, I said this before, your dream needs tomorrow. Tomorrow needs clean air, clean water, food security, and a conducive environment. And that needs nature. So your dream needs tomorrow, tomorrow needs nature, and so you need to take care of nature because your dream needs a tomorrow to even have the chance to become a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Phyllis, I mean, we had hoped to hear more from you, but the connection has been a bit of a mess. But if you're here with us now, maybe you can just give us your final comments, those thoughts that you'd like each one of us to take home.
My final comment would be that when we're talking about the right to a clean and healthy environment, we should also always remember to define the work of land and environment defenders. This is a group of people who raise up to challenge all of us towards protecting these rights to a clean and healthy environment. Faced land and environment defenders, both here in Kenya and outside, have faced a lot of criminalization and a lot of repression because of standing up and defending nature. And therefore, whenever we are talking about the right to a clean and healthy environment, we must always remember to integrate the work of land and environment defenders because of the work that they are doing. So let us always remember to integrate the case of land and environment defenders in the conversation around the right to a clean and healthy environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's give her a hand. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here and online. It has been a pleasure. This conversation continues in a moment, Winnie, that's correct. All right, we have a break now. 2 minutes, 1 minute. Okay. All right, so sharing more knowledge in 5 minutes. In the meantime, let's stretch and speak with each other. All right, thank you very much.
when you mention my name. DJ Cypherly in the mix.
I don't rush. You put me down. See why you make me bitch. Why you make me bitch. See why you did to me. God save me, please. I know you got me now. I know you got me now. I know you got me now. Followed you up and down. Followed you up and down. Followed you up and down. Now I don't lost my mind. Now I don't lost my mind. Now I don't lost my mind. Now I know you lied. Now I know you lied. Now I know, cause the doctor said I burnt my liver. I've been drinking smoking cigarettes.
Bonner. I'm the Associate Legal Officer at UNEP in the International Environmental Law Unit. And I've been participating in the Wiki for Human Rights, the Right to a Healthy Environment for the last 2 years. This was my first community event, and it was really, really exciting to be able to speak to Wikimedians, to other members of the community who are interested in environmental rights, climate change, environmental justice, and all of the myriad topics that relate to the right to a healthy environment. We were able to share experiences, hear from incredible storytellers and people who are engaging with these issues right here on the ground, as well as share knowledge and other avenues that might be useful in the future as we continue to fight for the recognition for the right to a healthy environment and for a safe, healthy environment for us all to live in. Thank you. Good. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm Hamida Malasen, founder, Mazingira Women Initiative and CEO. And we deal with environment conservation. Today we had this event, and it was organized by Wikimedia on rights to healthy environment, which is very relevant with my work and relevant with the current issues and current status, bearing in mind we are now on climate change crisis, whereby we have a lot of challenges in line with environment conservation. And hence it's very important to discuss about the right to healthy environment, in the sense that we need a pollution-free environment, we need clean environment, we need an environment whereby we can have food security, whereby we know currently we have a serious shortage in line with the rights to water. Basically, it means by the end of the day, our basic rights will be construed and will not be realized as a result of lack of a healthy environment. Therefore, it is very important. The conversation is very relevant and very key, because we cannot realize other rights if we will ignore the right to proper healthy environment. By the end of the day, this is a conversation that needs to be mainstreamed into every sector and into every law, because when we look at agriculture will only thrive if concentrations are made on the proper environmental conservation. Bearing in mind we are dependent on rain-fed agriculture, whereby the rains are not even forthcoming. Not even a single farmer can even talk about the seasons currently. Therefore, we'll have lack of food security, and that will impact seriously on the health. It will impact on livelihoods. It will impact on the basic well-being. And in fact, the issue of pricing of food commodities, because the demand will be very high and yet the supply will be extremely low. So by the end of the day, this is very relevant. I thank Wikimedia Foundation for this conversation, and I believe it has to go on to the level whereby everybody is actually brought into book and brought forward for this discussion. Thank you so much.
Ten, 9, 8, 7. I start. My name is Peter Frederick Moll. I am the CEO and founder of Stand Up Shoutout, which is an international non-government organization based in 20 countries and in Kenya, 39 counties. Human rights interlinked to environmental rights and climate justice is something that should be so plain and simple, something that should be broken down to the normal wananchi to understand that when they have clean water, that is a right, not a privilege. When they have clean air, that is a right, not a privilege. When they have access to food security, that is a right, not a privilege. And we need to start breaking down this information, and that's why I believe this workshop is so important, and that's why the Wiki Foundation and the Wiki Working Group is doing a great job to not just make knowledge accessible, but knowledge understandable, to fill in the gap where we are missing information that is needed for our generation especially to secure the future. When I have knowledge, I have understanding. When I have understanding, I have the better chance of making the right decision. That is why access to the information and the empowerment of information is key. When we talk about the basic human right interlinked to climate justice and environmental justice, we're talking about the right to life. We're talking about the right to chase your dreams, to have a tomorrow, for your dreams to become a reality. I believe some takeaways is we must share best practices and case studies that have succeeded in securing the rights of human beings interlinked to environment and nature at large. By sharing these best practices, we're able to understand and learn from those who have come before us. For what someone won a case or advocated or created a solution in West Africa. When this article is posted on Wikipedia or accessible to young people, we can then draw strategies to implement them in Kenya and across the world. The main thing here is when you have access to knowledge in terms of your basic human rights interlinked to environment and climate justice, you are then breaking down barriers of silos by creating access to the information. You're building bonds and bridges and allowing people to be empowered to do what they need to do to safeguard their future. I think, last but not least, a takeaway from this workshop, and when it comes to human rights and making sure that we safeguard, you as an individual have a responsibility to yourself and to your community. Be hungry for knowledge, ask questions, because it is in the questions where we see the gaps. If you ask me 1 + 1 equals, and I don't know the answer, we already know there's a gap. But if you never ask me what 1 + 1 is, I would never know of the gap. So questions are important. Seek out. Don't care if you look foolish, because if you look foolish now, tomorrow you're an empowered individual because of the question you asked. I appreciate the Wiki Foundation, the Wikipedia Working Group. It's been a great session and it's given me the opportunity to share knowledge. For me, that is I love to teach, I love to learn, I love to understand, I love to empower. And the convening of people should never be undermined or downplayed. And the access to knowledge is the empowerment of our future. Thank you.
It is your favorite #1 Nigerian saxophonist. My name is Yemi Sax.
Some respect when you mention my name.
Huh?
My name is Yemi Sax.
So I'm audible. So let me know when it should start. Okay, my name is Njoroge Waiganjo, and I work with Kenya Climate Change Working Group. And I'm here with Wiki for Human Rights and Climate Change. Basically, today we are talking about how we can form a synergy between human rights and climate change. And we were discussing the issues on energy, on gender, and tunaweza kidogo, tunaweza break kidogo.
You don't know why it's going on.
It's SK on the track.
Turn up the speakers. It's DJ Cyber. Put some respect when you mention my name. DJ Cypher Lee.
You all ready?
Yeah.
So remember, when one is talking, all of you are the frame, right? All of you are the frame.
So tuangaliane na tupe hapo kwa viewfinder.
Or when someone is talking, we look there. And when
Hi, I'm Faith Manyolo, one of the co-founders of the Wikimedia Community User Group in Kenya, and I would like to allow my colleagues to introduce themselves before we go on.
Hi, my name is Winnie Kabinti, also co-founder of the Wikimedia Community User Group in Kenya and an organizer of the Wiki for Human Rights workshop in Kenya.
Hi, my name is Carol. I am an organizer of the Wiki for Human Rights campaign in Kenya and a Wikipedian.
We are really privileged to be organizing this event, this workshop. We have met a lot of very dignified personalities, a lot of people who are worthy to this cause, and this is our first time doing this, so it's a really good time for us. Carol and Winnie have been in the forefront of organizing this, so I'd like to ask you, what were the challenges when you were doing this?
You want to start or I start?
Go ahead and start.
I think the biggest challenge for us at the very beginning, we were like, this is the first time we are hosting an event around matters environment, climate change, and even better still, a workshop. As the user group, we've mostly done editathons around the months of Africa cinema, Wiki Vibrance, Wiki Loves Africa, Wiki Loves Women. But when it comes to workshop, this was the first time. So of course we were a bit scared about the outcomes and even reaching out to, of course this is a conversation, this is a topic that has to really involve the experts in that space. So one of the challenges, I wouldn't say it was a challenge, but one of the key things that we had to do for this workshop to be really successful was to mobilize the experts in that space. And so we embarked on reaching out to various organizations within that space, civil society organizations, and everybody came together. So yeah, it was one of the most tasking things to do, but it turned out so well, and we are proud. Carol, do you have anything to add?
Sure. I think this has been crazy 3 months trying to pull things together, trying to get the right people. At one point, we were not sure whether we are going to make it, whether we are going to pull this through. And I think what was most exciting was we are doing it for the first time in Kenya.
Greg is taking photo.
Okay. Okay, I was just talking about how it has been 3 great months trying to pull things together. At one point we were scared whether we are going to make it, whether we are going to find the right people, whether we are going to bring this to Nairobi, and being a first time thing we are doing, we put all our energies. And I think we are here today. I'm just excited. I can't believe we made it. We burnt the midnight oil for so many days with Winnie, and we had great people supporting us, and I think we want to do it again. Right, Winnie?
Exactly. And then one of also the most outstanding things about this event today is we've seen how we've upholded the spirit of Wikipedia, which is all about knowledge sharing. So seeing all these organizations, we have had 5 organizations in the environment, gender, climate spaces, just seeing everyone come together to share their knowledge on even what they are doing at the community level, or what we can do better to enhance the advocacy and even information around environmental rights. I think that has been so powerful, and one of the things we are looking forward to doing during this phase of this campaign is also get to recruit new editors who are just in this space, so that again, because currently what we have ongoing right now is a knowledge cafe session, where we have participants in breakout sessions to just discuss different topics in depth, and then shortly they are going to come back and present the outcomes of that. So as Wikipedians in the room, we are going to use those notes to see the content gaps that are missing, as well as recruit participants who would like to learn more about editing, and hopefully also get to bring the gender gap, because we are so passionate about that. Yeah. Faith, do you have anything else to add as far as this campaign is concerned?
All that you've mentioned is the questions I had. I'm really just pleased that we are here, and I can't wait to see what else we have in store.
Yeah.
Just a question maybe to Faith. What has been the most exciting time on Wikipedia so far? Doing your own projects, doing general projects,
For me, I can't pinpoint one thing that's been the most exciting, but it's been the general progression of everything from when I began to where I am now. It's nice that I've been able to grow and I'm able to interact with all these different personalities. I'm able to create some impact on open knowledge. So it's been a whole series of continuous improvement.
Exactly, and that's the thing with Wiki, because as an organizer, I've noticed that every event you organize, every campaign you organize, you learn different things. Like this particular campaign has shown me the power of, communication skills, project management, because we had to manage a lot of different service providers, different organizations. So just communicating our goals, our agenda, because that is what brings people. Yeah, you can have a plan, but if you do not know how to communicate it, to put it out there, then it's just you and your co-organizer. Yeah, so that has been the good part, and also the collaboration that comes with it. We've received a lot of support from the foundation, from the campaigns team.
Yeah, sure.
So that has really been great, and the fact that we also had a member of the staff, Veronica, that affirmed us.
Yeah.
It really, there was some confidence we had today. Yeah.
And I think what I would, for me, say it's been a learning curve from what is Wikipedia to what do I have, to what it has to offer for me there. And the learning journey, for me, it's been 2 years of learning, networking, and pulling things that I never thought I would pull, identifying stories about climate change. I never thought I would find myself in such a space about the gender gap. We never found ourselves, whether we'll find ourselves talking about gender and so passionate about it. So I think it's a journey that we are looking forward, especially as a user group in Kenya.
Exactly.
And we are excited. We are already mapping up how the year will be.
One of the few regional affiliates that have actually been all co-founded by all female co-founded. We're proud of that.
Really excited about that. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank
So for our online audience, please stick around. We are coming back with submissions for the breakout sessions. Yeah.
you don't bust my eyeglass. You don't scatter my glass. See my eye, I don't cross. You put me down. See why you make me bitch. Why you make me bitch. See why you did to me. God say okay. Got me now. I know you got me now. Followed you up and down. Followed you up and down. Followed you up and down. Now I don't lost my mind. Now I don't lost my mind. Now I don't lost my mind. Now I know you lied. Now I know you lied. Now I know cause the doctor said I burned my liver. I've been drinking smoking cigars. Used to sing and play my guitar. Now I'm just thinking some bizarre. Everything where you talk, I do. Everything where you ask, I do. Say you don't bust my eyeglass. You don't scatter my glass. See my eye, I don't cross. Put me down. See why you make me bitch. Why you make me bitch. See why you did to me.
Haya, let's give Emily and Phoebe a good clap. Tracy, tafadhali, tunapiga makofi.
Oh, okay. My name is Emily, and I'm with Phoebe. So our group didn't have a name, so we discussed everything that was on the concept note, and every topic that needed to be discussed. So on the first component of the right to a healthy environment as a human right was the importance of environmental justice, climate justice, and human rights-centered approaches to the local, national, and international action on climate crisis. So from our group, we just looked at the whole component as an holistic thing. So on the environmental justice, we said that it ensures that there is the enjoyment of the basic human rights. For instance, if awareness is created on matters environment, the people at the grassroots be able to understand what is their human rights. What is their human rights? For instance, the right to a clean and healthy environment, the right to clean water and sanitation, the right to clean air. So when now we have human rights centered approaches, for instance, on the local levels, it will be creating awareness to people at the grassroots. So by the end of the day now, we find that people will be able to enjoy their human basic rights. And also through environmental justice and climate justice, we also discuss on the importance that it helps hold state and non-state actors accountable. For instance, the case of the Winohuru community that Phyllis was talking about, we had state actors like NEMA that were being held accountable. We had the county government also of Mombasa. So cases of environmental justice and climate justice ensures that state and non-state actors are held accountable. For instance, now in the case of Winohuru community, there was little public participation that was done by even NEMA, and even the public participation that was done, we find that the community were given wrong information. They actually told the metal smelter was actually producing biscuits. So we find that the access to environmental justice now helps to hold state and non-state actors responsible for their actions. Another issue was also to the importance of environmental justice and climate justice was to help mitigate the effects of environmental crisis that has already happened. For instance, I will still give the case of Winohuru since we have been talking about it. One of the mitigating efforts that was presented to court was the issue of land reclamation, whereby now an expert in lead advised that that soil be removed from the community, then now it is replaced with another soil. So you find that cases like of environmental justice like that will help now mitigate the effect, so that now the community in the long run will be able not to face adverse effects of this particular environmental crisis. I won't say much so that other groups can have things to say. So I'll just go to the second point that I'll let Phoebe handle it.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Phoebe. I'll be taking the second question. It says, human well-being in the face of environmental damage caused by pollution with a focus on the direct impact on other human rights. So the right to a healthy environment is one of our rights. And when this right is violated, other rights are also affected. Other human rights are also affected. So one of the rights that is affected is the right to proper sanitation and clean water. when we destroy our environment and when we don't look up to having a healthy environment, the right to proper sanitation and clean water is violated. Then there's also the right to good health and well-being. When we do not look at having a healthy environment, our health in general starts to deteriorate and we are violating that right. And then there's also the right, those were some of the rights that we looked at: the right to clean water and sanitation and the right to good health. And those might just be the two things and two rights that we tackled, but it's evident that there's many other rights that are violated or are affected when a healthy environment is not something that we are working towards.
I'll handle the third point of discussion, the nexus between biodiversity and human rights. Understanding how human well-being is dependent on a biodiverse natural ecosystem. With the biodiversity, we looked at the aspect of land as a natural resource, and also as a component of the biodiversity itself. So we discussed that the aspect of food security, the access to food as a human right, is dependent on land. And biodiversity, having forests in mind, we discussed that they act as sources of water, and also they also help. They also help curb the issue of climate change, considering, I think it's common knowledge since primary, we've been told that forest helps give us rain. So we discussed also that forest as a source of water, and also clean air. We understand that we as human beings exhale carbon dioxide that actually plants take in, and they give us oxygen. So our basic human right to access of clean air is dependent on plants because of that very factor. The right to shelter is a human right, is a basic human right. So we as human beings right now, we are sheltered on an environment, I presume. So that is how we, those are the few points that we discussed on the nexus between biodiversity and human rights. We also had the right to good health and well-being. We have, and at this point, we discussed that medicine actually comes from plants. So for us, in cases of sickness, and even in cases where one needs to be treated, and even to help boost your immunity, for you to actually enjoy this particular right of good health and well-being, it's also dependent on plants. So those were the few points that we discussed on the nexus between biodiversity and human rights. So the next point was spotlight existing environmental injustices at the community level. One that is home to us is the Winohuru community on the cases of lead poisoning. I think Phyllis was able to explain that, so I'm not going to explain much. There's also a case of the Margarine and the salt companies. I don't know if you've heard of the case of Margarine and the salt companies. So there are 6 salt companies in Margarine. Margarine is a place in the coastal region that the community has been trying to fight for justice because of the environmental injustice that has been happening in that community. So what happens when they're harvesting salt, you find that the water, I'm trying to find the word, like they're fishermen one, let me try explain it well. So the Margarine community, we have salt companies whereby now sodium chloride is being mined at this particular community. So one, you find that the people at the Margarine do not have the protective clothing that they need. So by the end of the day, you find that their well-being, their health is being affected. And also that for those who the economic activities like the fishermen, you find that because of harvesting salt now, the water goes far away from the land. So, and the people from the community do not have the equipment to actually be able to fish in deep sea. And also we have the plants like the mangroves. Because of salt harvesting, you find that actually mangroves have actually died. Actually in Magarini, they're actually becoming extinct. And it was actually a place whereby mangrove plants were there in plenty. So because of such activities of the salt mining in Magarini, it has brought about cases of environmental injustices. There's an organization called Malindi Human Rights Forum that is actually handling this particular issue. Also, the issue of coal plants in Lamu, I think you've heard of it, the burning of fossil fuels. This was also a case of an environmental injustice at the community level. The case also of the Lake Victoria water hygiene menace, I think you've also heard of it. So these are just a few cases of environmental injustices at the community level. And even us, Nairobi, we have seen the cases of sewages being clogged. So those are just a few. Also, there's one in Athi River. I don't know if you've heard of the brewery in Athi River, whereby there's a slum actually in Devki. That this particular company do not have a good drainage system. So you find that they're draining their wastage into the slum. So you find that, mothers who are actually pregnant, they're losing their babies and even losing their lives. So the case is still, they're still doing a petition in it, but it's also a spotlight of an existing environmental injustice at the community level.
All right, so I'll be taking you through the second last question that says, oh, it's not a question really. The statement says, connecting climate change negotiations to human rights within vulnerable continents like Africa. So we didn't point out specific human rights, but we pointed out things that can happen in these negotiations that can help in pushing for the agenda of the human rights in regards to environment pushed in these continents. So one of the things we said is creating meaningful participation for young people. When people from continents like Africa go to these negotiations, they are able to bring back what has been discussed in the negotiations and work it out in the continent. Something else that we think is important to be done is acknowledging indigenous knowledge. And when it comes to these continents like Africa, making sure that we have people streams and we have indigenous people recognized, and the knowledge that they have is shared and is put in also some of the, what do we call them, some of the outcomes. They put such things in them, and this will help, especially in the implementation. So those are some of the things that we discussed, and I'll let my colleague add if there's anything else I left out.
All right. When we were discussing about adopting indigenous knowledge, Phoebe actually pointed something so interesting. She was talking about human and wildlife conflict. So she gave an example of how we human beings can peacefully coexist with the wildlife. So I think she can explain it better.
All right. So I don't know if safety is one of the human rights. If it is, as human beings, we need to protect our environment and nature, and this comes to indigenous knowledge. The example that I gave during our discussion is the fact that I come from a lovely area close to Savo, and my grandmother lived on the border, and she never had an incident where she encountered an elephant because she knew about the elephant. She knew the elephant corridors. She knew how to not provoke an elephant. So in such type of negotiations, when we bring indigenous people and recognize them, they can use this knowledge, put it in outcomes, and they can take it in their continents and help in the implementation, which along and down the line, you will see, as in the example that I have given, helps in the promotion of a right to a safe environment.
Okay, just the last point on connecting climate change negotiations. What we advocated for was also the adoption of the bottom-up approach, whereby we have members at the grassroots who are actually facing this environmental justice to be included in these negotiations, because they're the very people who are wearing the shoe, so they know where it pinches. So The last one was gender and climate change as a human rights. We didn't get so much time to discuss on this because we were out of time. So what we pointed out on gender and its nexus to climate change climate change as a human right, we as a group agreed that women in most cases are termed as the caregivers of homes. And also in our discussions now, we really didn't come to an agreement, but we were discussing that women being caregivers at the most of the time they are more futuristic. The man is usually concerned about providing the need for now that actually can even jeopardize the our environment. But as women, we find that they care to think about their children and and all of it. So the nexus between there, we find that women tend to care more about the environment. Compared to the man, I'm not sure about that, but anyway. So, and also on this point, we discuss about the weak rights that are there, that we find that women are not allowed to own land. So when you talk about environmental sustainable development, then if the woman is, there are certain rights that communities that do not allow women to own land. So what happens to now environmental sustainable development? So you find that at the end of the day, there will be increased inequalities in terms of gender because of the weak rights that now do not allow women to actually acquire land. So that was all from our group. Can you please give that group a better clap? Yes, so we will go to the next group. I don't want to appoint, just do me the honors and come forth. Hey, kulikuwa na group ya machopi huko nyuma. Are you doubting your abilities? Come, let's see you shine. Thank you so much, Phoebe. Thank you so much, Emily, for just presenting to us. We do appreciate.
Good afternoon. Ours will be so brief. To touch a base on the first question on the importance of environmental justice, climate justice, and human rights, centered approaches to local, national, and international action on climate crisis, we saw that environmental rights are universal, and human rights are inherent to human beings on the fact of them being human beings. So we talked about towards the local conventions, there are certain approaches that the national government is supposed to take place, such as the remedial measures, such that once a certain environmental right has been breached, what rights do a victim have in court? We also talk about the international actions. We say that we gave an example that Kenya is part and parcel of the international conventions, which seek to protect the environmental rights of human beings. So by that fact, they are held accountable, and they should put measures in place, such as law enactment, such as policy formulation, and also they should also take part in implementation of these national policies. My colleague will add something on the first point.
Some other things that we talked about is about holding governments accountable, the accountability, that climate justice, environmental justice, and human rights. It will make people aware that these issues are real and they're happening. So each individual, each organization, each group, each member state will be able to hold its government accountable. And it's also, another point is that when people are aware, it addresses the issues of gender also, all right? It also helps address issues on gender. It allows the inclusivity of all in climate, in crying out for climate justice, environmental justice, and human rights justice.
To address the second question on the human well-being in the face of environmental damage caused by pollution, I will lay emphasis on Article 43 of the Kenyan Constitution, which touch base on the economic and social rights. We talked about the right to clean water. So if there is no clean water and the water is polluted, that will cause, of course, health hazards to citizens. We also talked about noise pollution, which cause hearing problems. We also talked about air pollution, which can cause respiratory diseases like the Kariobangi, corroded mabatis, which cause harms to those living there. We also talked about we also talked about the air in people living around Thika. You know the health hazard that it imposes. My colleague will add something on that.
Another issue about pollution is it degrades the environment. And what happens when the environment is degraded? It affects agriculture. And what happens when agriculture is affected? It affects food security and nutrition. So that's another key issue that is being affected by pollution. And another one is access to clean water. That's sustainable development number what? Is it number 6 or number what? Yes, it affects that one. And also access to a clean environment. You have a right to a clean environment. And also it is in MCA. It is part of MCA, where as a law in Kenya, you have a right to a clean environment. And with pollution, it is threatening that one. That one fact, it is affecting it. Yeah.
On addressing the third question, which is about biodiversity and human rights, I would like to lay emphasis that biodiversity is the relationship between living things in the environment. So to begin with, we address the issue of human-wildlife conflict. As you know, some people live near the wildlife zones, which again, we see the animals coming to attack the crops, which would have been used for human consumption, and that leads to food insecurities again. We also talked about, of course, there is danger posed by that. When the lions were roaming around Langata area, when they had escaped from Nairobi National Park, of course, that imposed a health risk a safety risk to humans living around that area. We talked about cutting down trees, which again, we are experiencing this hot weather because of now we don't have the filtration because of the trees are not there. We also talked about we depend on trees, we depend on rains for crops to grow, and such is not experienced because of the climate change. So there is an interlink between all these things. Yeah.
Just to add something about on that question, understanding how human well-being is dependent on a diverse natural ecosystem. We can also talk about dependence on the ecosystem. That's what we call ecosystem services. What the ecosystem provides for us are what we call ecosystem services. And how are humans dependent on that one? We depend on the ecosystem for food. We depend on it for water. We depend on it for shelter. We depend on it for health purposes. We get some health benefits from nature. Those are some of the examples that we get from the environment, things that we call ecosystem services. Yeah.
On addressing the fourth issue, which is spotlighting existing environmental injustices at the community level, we talked about some various forms of pollution. We talked about water pollution. People living around Mathare River can actually confirm that the water there is polluted, yet the residents there depend on that water for consumption, which again poses health risk. And again, when Phyllis was presenting, she talked about the lead in water. So I will not go into details about that because she was so elaborate on that. Also talk about noise pollution, which also, it forms part and parcel of, because of this noise pollution, we have the hearing, we have the hearing issues. People are become impaired in various ways. We talked about air pollution, which brings about these respiratory diseases. Once you go through this Mombasa Road, those air, those air particles which are released again bring such issues. We also talked about scarcity of food, and we also talked about environmental degradation, where my colleague will talk about an occurrence in, is it Kitui Makweni?
If you can remember very well, it is something that was even in the media about the Kenya pipeline that had burst somewhere in Ukambani, somewhere there, and it's Naikaribu Mto. That's a very good example of spotlighting. There is also another one that is actually happening right now under the East African crude oil pipeline, and it is causing a lot of damage to the environment. And so many insurance have been wamejitoa kwa hiyo kitu, and it's a big spotlight. And another example is in just the recent one that happened in Nakuru County, the Solai Dam that burst. That is also another environmental issue. We have forest fires that are happening in Abadeas. That's an environmental issue. And what else? Oh, and another thing that is in the spotlight is the drought that is happening. That is also another environmental issue that is happening in Kenya. And it is growing very fast.
In addressing the second last question about connecting climate change negotiation to human rights within vulnerable continents like Africa, yes, we are vulnerable because we are suffering as a result of, what is it called? As a result of these gas emissions from these developed economical states. So we saw that there are provisions under the international conventions such as the Paris Agreement 2015 and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which makes these developed states, they actually make them be bound by such provisions to fund the less developed states in combating this climate change by putting measures of the adaptation and mitigation factors.
Another view that we came up with is we can have we can talk about climate change, and we can also voice out our concerns to the international community and go and tell them we are suffering out there. Then what have you talked? What do you want next? So some of the key issues that I wanted to understand here is what should continents that are most vulnerable to climate change, or those countries that are most affected by climate change, what should they be bringing to the table during those negotiations? Should they be talking about adaptation strategies? Should they be talking about financing? Should they be talking about technology transfer? Should they be talking about the implementation strategies? And also, should they be talking about being inclusivity in their governments? Those are some of the key issues that need to be discussed by these countries, the African countries. Some of they are known as the South nations. During these climate change negotiations. Yeah.
And also to add a point on that, I've noticed that most of the states concentrate on the remedial measures rather than the preventative measures. So we feel like states should now concentrate on the preventative measures, preventing the harm from occurring, rather than them waiting for the harm to occur and taking actions. That would ease this climate change question. In addressing the last, sorry.
Just to add on what she's talking about, harm is already with us. And just to give a very good example is that Africa combined, the whole of Africa, the whole continent of Africa, the percentage of emissions that we emit globally is only 2%. The 54 countries that we have in Africa is only 54%. Then the question is, should we be concentrating on mitigating more or in adaptation? We should have a clear roadmap on what we want as an African, as a continent. Okay?
On to the last question, which is about gender and climate change as a human right. There's this right which exists, the right to equality. Subjecting every gender to the right to equality in economic, political, and social activities So when we talked about environmental right, which again I said is a collective right, we cannot subject environmental rights to a certain gender and leave out the other. So we feel like, actually it's there. Every person, be it female or male, is entitled to environmental rights, regardless of them being male or female. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and also to add to her point is that when we talk about gender equality, it's all about inclusivity. Be it a man, be it a woman, be it people living with disabilities. Yani, everyone should be included in regards to climate change issues, environmental issues, pollution issues. All of them, they should be included in them. And that's all we had from our group. And thank you.
Once you do your claps, I will request you do them better. So do them better. Yeah, so the third group, we are almost done. So I'm sure maybe the third group will do it faster because we've gone through the topics. As the third group is coming forth, maybe the fourth group you should be electing or suggesting or telling us who is coming next.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. As we tackle the point number 1, since the environment has become the one of core issue that need to be battled for climate change, number 1 that we handle is the livelihood we are living now. The life has become so hard to many people, in which most of the people has already give up. So we need to become our brother's keeper. Number 2 is security, food security, availability to access it. It is more expensive. Like managing people to serve, like to help one another has become hard. Working together, showing everyone that we have money and we don't have. Helping our parents became difficult for us. That make us to be realize what to do next.
Oh, thank you, my colleague. This is the committee of experts. Yes. Actually, okay, the issue number 1, the importance of environment justice, as she has outlined, it makes people aware of the challenges that actually we are facing, and also to become aware of the impact of the same environment and climate justice. So she has outlined well. So number 2, on human well-being in the face of environmental damage caused by pollution. What do you have, my sister?
Drought in many areas, in which, in case many people doesn't have water. Like place where I come from, we don't have water. I go to school every Sunday. I make sure that I fetch water, and I go from very far distance to go get water. But sometimes it became very hard to make sure that I help and make sure that my siblings, dad, mom, drink clean water too. Mostly is chemical that we are using now. Nowadays we come in life that we eat food that are not good in our life. Not like back then, parents used to boil the food, like no using of oil, putting more things like Royco, which bring cancer in our life. So we need to change on that.
To add on it, on matters pollution, there is this issue whereby water is contaminated, and most of the time the waters within the urban area settlements And within the informal settlements, we get a lot of clogged trenches, whereby the water piping is actually linked to the trenches. And by the end of the day, we get communicable diseases, and people get infected with the unclean water because the water supply is not of quality. So that is basically the impact of pollution on water. Pollution on land, we find that the area is not conducive for the people, for livelihoods. There is no dignified life because by the end of the day, there's a lot of pollution everywhere, a lot of dumping, that improper waste management processes. So on biodiversity and human rights, understanding how human well-being is dependent on biodiversity and natural ecosystem. What do we have for us? What do you have for us, my sister? We have depending on food. We are dependent on food basically, and we are dependent on clean air and clean environment. And of course, the animals also are dependent on it. They also depend on well-being. That is where we usually find there is conflict, human-wildlife conflict, as a result of biodiversity conflicts on matters human rights. And then there is also, we felt within the ecosystem, there is challenges within the locality whereby there is serious urban-rural migration as a result of impact of, basically the impact of rural-urban migration. We find that there is no proper housing, there is no proper infrastructure. So by the end of the day, the livelihood is usually compromised to the level whereby we can say due to lack of proper urban planning. Spotlight existing environmental injustice at the community level. As a result of clogged drainages, we find that there is water pollution, there is also noise pollution, and also linking sewages within the informal settlements and within the areas, and the bigger impact within the national circle, whereby there is a lot of injustices between the issues that have been outlined by previous groups, for instance, the coal in Lamu and different areas.
The gender and climate change as human right, as we find that women, most of the women are the most common for the higher risk of fetching water and the higher risk of fetching water. So we need to improve on how we can link out, help one another, even though we use the chemical to preserve the water, so that our animals, people can live in a good environment. Planting trees can help most, because nowadays we see people are cutting more trees, so that causes lack of water, rain. Like now we are in dangerous climate change in which we don't have water to drink. We drink the water that is not good for our health, so we need to improve on that. Thank you.
To add on it, on connecting climate change and negotiation to human rights, we as a group, we felt it is not a rocket science issue. Wangari Maathai did it, and she was not an expert. But what she did was actually ensure that trees are planted, and that is how we can negotiate our ways to proper environment, by actually ensuring that we have the 10% tree cover that we agreed in the Paris Agreement. And also, when we will have enough tree cover, definitely the water catchment areas will be supplemented. Definitely we'll have enough water supply, and we will avoid siltation within the rivers and the lakes, So by the end of the day, we will not be having flooding impacts by the end of the day. And then as a result of that, we will have enough water. That is, we will have enough rain. We will not be dependent on rain-fed agriculture. We will have food security. We will have enough food supplies. And then by the end of the day, we will have enough livelihoods, better lives and better health, because we'll have adequate food supplies. So it is not rocket science. As much as we want to put more technical issues to it, the bottom line, what we need to do and what we have to do, we need to increase our tree cover and actually ensure it is mainstreamed within the curriculum for every pupil to understand the benefits of actually planting trees, because that is the step towards the climate change mitigation and adaptation processes as a result of that. Bearing in mind, as we alluded earlier, climate change crisis, we are on disaster elements and theories, whereby on preparedness, we are done. We are not anywhere near it. We are only on mitigation and trying to look for adaptation mechanism. To add on gender and climate change, there has to be some aspect of inclusivity, because different gender are affected differently by the climate change effects. We have, even as far as even the hormonal imbalance currently as a result of pollution. So those are some of the impacts of the climate change issues. Therefore, it is very important to acknowledge the fact that we have women who actually go to fetch water the whole day. So it affects women more. As much as it affects men, it affects women more, because women are more linked to usage of water as opposed to men. But also it affects those people living with disability more and worse, because maybe they have mobility challenges. So getting water is a challenge times 2. Thank you so much from our group.
That was the group of committee of experts. Can you give them a better clap? Nice. So I think we are learning a lot, and even the breakout sessions have been very impactful. Just the way we get knowledge through Wikipedia, we are also getting a lot of knowledge and information through the discussion. So this is the last group. Give them your time. They'll be done in 5 minutes. Okay, 10.
Thank you for pressurizing us, Sarah. So, hi everyone. This is group 4, and we decided to take our sweet time, and we went through the discussion points. So without wasting much time, we'll go right to the points. The importance of environmental justice, climate justice, human rights-centered approaches to local, national, and international action on the climate crisis. And at the beginning of our discussion, something that we discussed and thought that it's very important to mention is that whenever we hear of climate change, environmental justice, human rights-centered approaches, we think of bodies like UNEP and big organizations, forgetting that these are responsibilities that should start with us. Taking care of our environment and treating our environment with justice starts right with us. It starts when you litter carelessly. So the responsibility, we should not go looking for these bodies or start advocating or carrying placards and demanding that Nairobi River be cleaned when you're next to your door, you've littered, and even you eat your sweets and just drop the papers next to you. So the responsibility should start with us. And we say that the importance of this justice is that we know that when we treat our environment right, it translates to better human rights or quality human rights. It translates to quality food and quality shelters, clean air, and clean environment in general, without going into details because they've been mentioned before by other groups. And again, we said human well-being, that's point 2, in the face of environmental damage caused by pollution, with focus on the direct impact on other human rights. That is pollution, pollution and health, right to water, etc. Where are my points? We say that our own well-being is interlinked to quality environment, and when we take care of the environment, we are indirectly taking care of ourselves, because what we give to the environment will later give it to us. And I gave an example of Rongai, where I come from. We do not have a proper drainage system, or any at all. And what happens is that we have so many lorries called honeysuckers that come to estates every 3 months or so to suck honey. And where they dump is really none of our business. Me, as an owner of an estate or apartment, I'll pay you as a honeysucker. You come suck the honey. Where you dump it is really none of my business. And we know for sure that most of it end up in our rivers. And along those rivers, we have vegetables that are planted there. And those vegetables, because of enough fertilizer, they have the healthiest looking leaves and the attracting leaves, and you look at it and you're like, this is the kind of vegetable I want. And eventually they will end up in our plates. So we might really ignore these small actions or these things we think we are doing to create temporary solutions, but they end up coming back to us and biting us in a major way. So what we were focusing on really was creating localized solutions to these things and looking at ourselves as individuals. What are we doing to protect our environment? What are we doing to ensure that our environment is safe and conducive, which will in turn translate to the quality of our lives? Again, in Rongai, for those who can't afford honeysuckers, because like I said, they're expensive, and you need to do this on regular basis. We wait until it rains or in the middle of the night and release it on the road. And this again affects us because it ends up in polluting the air and affecting the lives of those who live near, what are they called? Water bodies. Do we really have any water bodies in here? Mitaro. I don't know what are they called? But mitaro. No, mtaro, not mto. Mto is a river. Drainage. I think trenches, yes, trenches. So the people who live near trenches, and these people, we might think that we stay in apartments, so we are safe, we can do whatever we want, but they are our relatives. They somehow, one way or another, get sick and will end up again finding ways to even do funds for their health care and stuff. Again, human well-being in the face of environmental damage, we know that when we have overpolluted environment, it translates to low immune system because of the exposure to toxic from air, from the water we drink, from the food we eat. We end up very vulnerable and exposed to incurable diseases and some diseases. Every day you go to a hospital or you hear somebody has a disease with a very long name that you can't even explain, which strangely were not there during the times of our forefathers and our grandparents. But now things like cancer, it's all thanks to the environment and how damaged it is. On to the third point, biodiversity and human rights. Understanding how human well-being is dependent on a biodiversity, natural ecosystem. Our point was simple. We are the environment. Our livelihoods, our feeding, our living depends on the environment. We eat biodiversity. We eat food from planted using water. We eat fish from the rivers and lakes and oceans, so they need to be well taken care of and to make sure that our actions contribute to safety of the ecosystem and to make sure that we take of it so that we can get clean air and even have clean water in circulation for the sake of plants and food that we consume, cutting down of trees. I was reading a book by, I think, Wangari Maathai or something on the cutting down of indigenous trees, the Mogumo tree. And she was saying that the Mogumo tree could stay for hundreds of years because its roots could go deep into the soil and it helped in protecting and holding together the soil, which in turn helped in protecting the land against landslides, against soil erosions that are so common nowadays. So yeah, I think that's it. I'll give my colleagues to continue.
Okay. On the issue spotlighting existing environmental injustice at the community level. Okay, we come up with some of the issues directing of human waste into the rivers or open areas. Like in most of various areas, you walk around, you may come up getting some of the human waste and many stuff being disposed in open area, others directed into the rivers. There are some of the issues that we can check on. Then the other one is littering. You find me, I buy a sweet, I eat the sweet or mandazi, I bought a mandazi, it has been wrapped in a paper, I eat it, then throw the paper away. Ovio. Yeah, it pollutes the environment, yeah. Then the other one is deforestation. Cutting of trees obvious. You see the Ngong forest. Many of the people in Kibra here, Kawangware, Dagoretti, they used to cut the trees in the forest. This goes to deforestation and it goes to drought, where you find some of the people in our region we fight. Yeah, deforestation causes a lot of problem and issues. Then the other is air pollution. We find garbages are being collected, takataka, they are burnt in open air, ovio. Then that goes to air pollution. We can't breathe clean air. The other one is vandalization of water pipes. Yeah, these are in many areas. You see, pipes of water are connected in open areas. Others are in a muddy area. You see, pipe is connected here. We walk over there. We kanyaga the pipe. Yeah, the other one is irresponsible of disposal of the dead animals and this is especially in our cities and most of the slums. We walk around, come across, tunakutana na dogi imekufa, we find a cat, and whatever else, they are dying, thrown everywhere. Yeah, they are not being buried. So you see, this one caused many major issues in our climate change. Then my colleague will go on. Yeah.
Thank you, my colleagues. I will finish the last two discussion points. And the first one is connecting climate change negotiations to human rights within vulnerable continents like Africa. And just as it has been discussed on our first point, that these vulnerable continents like Africa are on the recipient end of the effects of the pollution that is being operated in the developed countries. And the main continent that we discussed was Asia. Asia are the major industrial continent, especially in China. They produce a lot of stuff. But while Africa, even before civilization, we were known as hunters and gatherers. We never used to produce iron and all those other stuff. We were used to even making things with our hands. But the effects of industrialization in those developed countries are mostly affecting the vulnerable continents like Africa. And also our other point on that was that you find that these first world countries, they produce these products, and for the products that are not fit for human health, they tend to donate them to these vulnerable continents. And that's why we usually receive a lot of donations from this continent. My colleague was saying, for example, the maize that had toxic that we had to return to, was it Switzerland? Yeah, they are donated. We were actually buying it at a lower price as Kenyans, but it had toxic elements. So you find that these industrial, first developed countries, the products that do not fit the human health, they tend to donate them or terminate them or dump them in these vulnerable groups. And how can we now negotiate? And as Peter said during the panel discussion, unless we are in those boardrooms where these policies and rights are being made and are being discussed, our noise will be just noise. So as Africa and also as Kenya, we should aspire, or we should find our way to those rooms or those boardrooms where those policies are being discussed, especially in the global organizations within those committees, so that we'll be able to explain why we'll be able to make policies that will protect our continent, because we are not the main emitters of this pollution. And on the last point of discussion, which is on gender and climate change as a human right. So as have been discussed by other groups, that women are more vulnerable than men, or women and other genders are more vulnerable than men. They are also at the receiving end of the effects. They feel more, or the effects of climate change affects them more. And our first point was, you find that, let's say places like Mandera or Turkana, those are very hot areas. are those women really able to wear sanitary towels? They're not, because if you wear sanitary towels in a hot area, they're likely to get cervical cancers. So women are more vulnerable and they're more affected. And also another point was the gender. On that was the gender culture and climate change, where we find that women are in some cultures or traditions, we find that women are, 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 are asked to dress in a certain way. Like, for example, they have to cover their heads, they have to wear long clothes, and you find these clothes there are so many, but the place that the women live are so hot, like let's say, let's still use Mandera or Turkana, and they have to cover their from head to toe, while men are allowed to wear vests, to wear shorts. So we find this, it's more biased. The culture culture is more biased on women, especially in climate change. Yeah, thank you. That was our discussions.
They are the last group, so we save the last for the best, yeah? So we give them a better clap. As we're giving them a better clap, let's give ourselves a good clap. You people don't love yourself. If I was given the opportunity, can you give yourself a better clap? Yeah, having sat down for those hours is not a small thing. So we are really, really appreciative. We thank you so much for showing up and for coming. From the group discussion, I think we will not do a summary of what each group has said because we've all had. But I think one thing that has come out clear is that we are the ones who should take charge. We are the ones in the position to make those changes. And we will not do it on the streets. We will try and find a place where we can be listened to, and we will give our recommendations. Sawa sawa? Yeah, so I think before we finish, if you have any feedback from the sessions, please, you're free to give Winnie or Carol any of your feedback, just generally anything, and even from the group discussions. If you have any feedback, feel free to give Carol or Winnie. Yeah. So thank you so much once again. We want to also thank everyone who took part in organizing this event. So every team that worked behind the scenes, we just want to say thank you so much. And the Wikipedia for giving us this opportunity and just allowing us to get to a room where we can talk, and not just talk, but talk about things affecting our lives and come out of these rooms with possible solutions. So we say thank you. So let's give everyone a good clap as we finish up and as Winnie comes.
Thank you, Sarah. Can we all appreciate Sarah? Hasn't she done a good job? Yeah, please let's appreciate her again once more. So before I say my closing remarks and the vote of thanks that Peter Moll has mentioned to me in the course of our engagement, and he said that he always tells me my role is that of a convener, and he says sometimes, or rather in the world where we live in, that's the most powerful role, you know, bringing people together for a common good. But then also, again, the same way you convene people, you can't get impact if people don't come. So I want to appreciate you because we made the call and you showed up, because that's important. That's everything. So I want to thank everyone who made their time to be here today. And one of the key things that we sought to do in the Wiki for Human Rights campaign, in the Wiki, actually, if I didn't clarify earlier or if I didn't emphasize on it, this campaign is being done globally. It's an annual campaign. So it's happening here, it's happening in Tanzania, it's happening in the US, it's happening all over. And the official launch, the official global launch is on 14th. We will share links with you so that you can also join. And also one of the key things, again, as Wikimedians, it's about putting factual, relevant information around the topics of discussion today. And so one of the things that we are also keen on doing as a Wikimedia community user group in Kenya is that we also want to reach out to you, the participants of today's workshop, who want to learn how you can contribute on Wikipedia, who want to learn, the women in this room. Actually, if I might give you some fun facts, because especially we've discussed about gender and climate change. So the wiki, the same way we talk about, women being marginalized, we are also marginalized in the digital space. So when we come to Wikipedia, we have very few biographies of women. And even the statistics are even more gloomy. When it comes to biographies, there's a criteria, there's guidelines on how exactly a biography should be. And if it doesn't meet that criteria, it's marked for deletion. So 41%, based on a recent study, which was just done last year, 2021, 41% of biographies that are marked for deletion because they don't meet our guidelines, Wikipedia guidelines on biographies of living people, are of women. So that is sad. And I remember there's a question that our great moderator actually even passed to one of our panelists, Veronica, and he asked whether the media is failing. And I will say, as someone in the media myself, I will say yes. The media is failing us when it comes to covering women, when it comes to covering young people who are notable, because one of the key things of biographies of living persons on Wikipedia is something we call notability. So someone has to be widely covered by reputable sources. And members of the Wikimedia community user group can tell you every day, because this particular user group is very keen on shrinking the gender gap, we write biographies, but the challenge we always have is that we don't have enough resources. So this is a call to action. And the same way, other than the biographies, the women who are also writing in the digital spaces are also very scarce. And I'm glad that I am not the best in mathematics, but today I can see by just a quick scan in the room, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we can confidently say that we have 70% female representation in this room. Is that a bit accurate or it's more? Is it 70% or more? 80. We need a round of applause for that. So as women, we cannot continue speaking about being marginalized, even in avenues where we can do something about it. So we are all custodians of information. We all have skills that we can share. And I hope after today, we are going to have a lot of you still signing up for a training that we are actually going to do next week to just learn how you can contribute and be part of shrinking the gender gap on Wikipedia. So allow me to give a vote of thanks. And I'll start by appreciating our keynote speakers, Mr. Peter Moll, Olivia Bona, Veronica Tamaini, and Phyllis Omido. They've done such a great job, right? Yeah, kindly let's give them a round of applause. I would also like to acknowledge the great contribution, the immense contribution of our moderator for today. He did such a great job in facilitating this discussion, right? Yeah, so kindly help me appreciate Mr. David Owino. I also want to, on behalf of the Wikimedia community user group in Kenya, to recognize the presence of all the organizations. Because one of the things we really wanted to do was not necessarily work with individuals, yes, but individuals in structured organizations. Because that will help even with accountability, that will help in forging partnerships. And I'm glad that one of the great conversations that have happened just in the middle of this workshop is a possible collaboration with SUSO, with the Wikimedia user group in Kenya, in an upcoming campaign called Wiki Loves Earth, which is an outcome of this event. So that is as far as Wiki Commons goes. Again, we will teach you more about and tell you more about Wikimedia projects. It's not just Wikipedia alone, there are also other projects. So let me appreciate the Organization of African Youth. Round of applause to them. I also want to appreciate the Kenya Climate Change Working Group, Mazingira Women Initiative, the Young Women Leaders Connect, SUSO, Stand Up, Shout Out, the Center for Justice, Governance, and Environmental Action. And last but not least, I want to appreciate my co-organizer for this campaign, Carol Mwaura, our communications lead, Cherry Boke and Sarah Itenya. I also want to appreciate our event hostess. I'm sure when you came in, you were welcomed nicely. You were asked, are you part of this team? Tell us which organization you're coming from. She ensured that our security was covered. We didn't have unnecessary intrusion, and she ensured that you were also directed where you needed to be. So help me appreciate Joyce Mudhoni. I also want to appreciate the great services of our service providers. They've remained dedicated, committed. I'm sure you've all seen, if you are tweeting, following the campaign, even the live stream, you've seen even the quality of the pictures we have, the quality of the videos, and that's because of the service providers we had who ensured we not only have the picture, the visual, but also the audio as well. So I want to say thank you to Compliment Pictures, who are doing the photography for the event, and Jeff Karinge and his team for the live streaming services. And we also want to really pass our gratitude to the Wikimedia Foundation for giving us the support to ensure that this event, even in resources, in human resource, to just ensure this event came to life. So ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate, and for everyone who joined our live audience, we celebrate you. Continue engaging with us. The hashtag is still Wiki for Human Rights, right to a healthy environment. And
Winnie, thank you so much for everything you've done from day one to today. And thank you, organizing, for doing magic. I'll say it's magic that you've done. Yeah. So let us pray. Yeah, please, let's clap for Whitney. She deserves it. Yeah, so let us pray. We come before you, our Heavenly Father. We thank you for today. We thank you for bringing us this far. And as we break, we hope these conversations will continue, and everything that people here have spoken, they will get to remember as people go back to their homes. May they have journey mercies as we prepare for lunch. Bless us and be with us. In Jesus' name we pray.
Let's pray. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Malik yaumiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alaihim. Ghairil maghdubi alaihim waladdallin. Amin. Thank you.
So we can break for lunch as we mingle. Please don't stand and eat alone. Connect, create networks, and yeah. Then our guests can